Hey old soul, just over a year ago I sold everything I owned in Australia and moved with my ex-husband and 3 kids to this beautiful land of Bali. Now I travel first class around the world, teaching people how to manifest their dream life. If you're ready to step into a paradigm that's so wild, so freeing, so abundant, then you're exactly where you need to be. Welcome. Hello and welcome to the Vibration of Wealth podcast. I am so freaking excited today because I have a guest all the way from Illawarra in New South Wales, the incredible Barbara Thompson, who has been preaching and practicing and serving so many people all around the world for her self-care expertise and guru from a nutritionist. Now she is a therapist and she is continuing the deep work of self-care, really preaching that the inner game is an outer game and going deep with the ways that we can love ourselves on the deepest level so that we can create radical, life-changing dreams and goals and everything that we could humanly desire. So we're going to go deep today. We're going to discuss everything. Nothing is off limits. And I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for being here, Barbara. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. What an introduction. I was just sitting here going, keep going, keep going. That's so nice. Because as you know, when you have your own podcast, it actually feels really relaxing going on someone else's podcast.
Yes, yes. And I'm so excited for those of you tuning into the first time. Barbara has the Studio Chat podcast, which I was a guest on, and we just vibed so well. So I'm having her as a guest on my podcast. And as you know, I don't have a lot of guests on my podcast, so she's very, very special. So I'm excited to go deep into your life story and just how you got from where you are to where you are now, or where you were to where you are now.
Yeah.
And yeah, nothing's off limits. And, just like my life story, we know that it could take you a million hours. And so you've got to perform the skill right now, the finite skill of wrapping up, 4 decades of insane personal growth and expertise into a few minutes. So go for gold.
Yeah, I'm actually going to start at the end quickly with something and then work my way back. So the reason why I do what I do now is I was never taught anything how to care for myself in any way. They say parents are role models. You learn from them. I cannot tell you one thing that I learned from my parents. I learned how to not be a human and how to not be, if I was ever to be a parent, not to be a parent from my parents. That's how strong it was. So my business is called Self-Care Studio. I am a therapist, but the reason why I called it that was because I truly believe that we need to start taking care of ourselves, and we don't know how to take care of ourselves because we're not really shown, but we're expected to know how to care for ourselves. And so that's kind of where I've ended up. But to start off with, I came into the world really, really quickly. I was a premature baby and I was 2 pounds and I had a 50-50 chance of living. I had so many, this was in 1980, so I had so many blood transfusions to the point where the doctors came to my parents and said, we don't think Barbara's going to survive the night, so be prepared. It's really, really touch and go. So I was born on the 4th of August and I was supposed to be born mid-October. So in 1980, I was really, really early and they didn't really know what to do. I was so early, I had no eyebrows, no eyelashes, my ears were all like rolled down. And
Wow.
and this was back in the day when men didn't really go into the birthing unit. My dad worked 24/7, he was all about money. And so when my dad finally finished work and then came to visit mum in hospital, I'm the oldest, so I'm the first child. And the first thing my dad said to my mother was, if that child is handicapped or demented or looks messed up in any way, I'm going to have nothing to do with her. And then he walks out and leaves my mum.
Wow. Oh,
So,
goosebumps.
yeah, I just
Oh,
got them too. And so that's how my life started. It wasn't until obviously you get older that you realize that I thought my family was normal and it was healthy and we had a good family. And it wasn't until My earliest memories of my brother and I used to come home from school and say to my dad, we used to get teased because my father used to be in textiles. He's had kind of a few different areas of careers, but when we were younger, it was in textiles, and he'd travel all around the world to Pakistan, Israel. This was like in the 80s and 90s, Hong Kong, and he'd always bring us like school bags or pencil cases. So we'd take them to school, and all the kids would tease us, "You're rich, you're rich." And we used to come home, and you just don't know. And we used to say to my dad, "Are we rich, Dad?" Because we used to get teased really badly for it. And he used to really just flip his lid and just go absolutely irate. He just used to lose his shit. So we were like, we're only asking you a question. Anyway, so my story was that I was daddy's little girl. I just thought he was the coolest guy ever in the world. The only time I could spend time with him was when he was working. So I'd work with him from the age of 5. I was working a register in a textile shop, packing things, working really, really hard. And then later on, he got into the petrol station industry. So as a teenage girl, my job was pumping gas, which I loved, but he had half a dozen petrol stations easy. And I used to work at all of those. And I was really into cars and all that kind of stuff. And I thought that my dad was really intelligent and worldly. But little did I know, ever since I was a baby, or even before I was born, my dad was nitpicking away at my self-esteem, my self-worth, my looks, and belittling me. So I'm the black sheep in my family. From the age of 7, I think I recognized, holy shit, I'm in a family that doesn't understand me. I'm so different from everyone else. And they would just push me down. I would walk into a room and people would turn around, and because I was very blue-eyed, really ringlet blonde hair, and it's more just my presence. So when I was a little girl, only now in the last 18 months have I recognized what presence means and who I am and the difference I can make in the world. So I've carried that around for a good 40 years and had no idea. I was like, why does everyone turn around? Obviously, my voice is quite loud, and my voice, I've been told, is quite distinctive. When you hear my voice once, everyone goes, "Oh, that's Barbara." And I just never knew what to do with it, to the point I'd walk into a room, even as a little girl, I'd get noticed. I'd always be the teacher's pet at school. And I think it was because they felt really sorry for me, because I had no love in my life. Never been hugged by my parents, never had my parents say, "I'm proud of you," never said, "I love you." There's no love. It was all financial, it was all money. And if I ever wanted anything, it would be, you have to work for it. And even then it was just such a controlled situation. And so my father would, over the years, belittle how I looked. Don't get holes in your ears because you look cheap and disgusting. Don't wear makeup. And then he started to do it in front of people. So especially as a teenage girl, I went to a private girls' school, and a few girls in my year were really struggling with eating disorders. And I was always into netball and playing sport. And even to start off with, I'm built so differently than all my friends. I'm built like my father, which is really horrible, but that's okay. Like, I'm just really solid and really muscular. I can put muscle on easy, and played competitive netball. And then later on got into bodybuilding and stuff, which is a perfect sport for me. But when you're a teenage girl, and especially like when I used to go to bars, I used to get guys tap me on the shoulders, tap me on the back and go, "Whoa, geez, you're a swimmer. You're a big unit. You've got big shoulders." Now, if I listen to those words now, if any girls listen to this, when they used to say solid or big, I instantly go, "That's fat." And when you're a young girl and all your friends are like teeny tiny. Now you think of that. Then on top of that, the man who I'm supposed to look up to and who's supposed to make me feel safe and loved and special would say, "You're ugly." And he'd actually joke in front of clients, like customers, sorry, I'm on my counselor brain. When I used to work at the till, like say 5:30 rush hour, if you've ever filled up gas, you know that there's lines out the door sometimes. And this particular day, it happened all the time, but this particular day, the line was out the door. I was standing at the counter with my dad, and he asked me about my friend. She was in hospital. How is she? And then he like hit me on my back, like really, really hard, and said, "Oh, I don't need to worry about you, Barbara. You're a big girl. You're solid. You eat a lot of food," and really started to belittle me. And I think all the line was guys, I'm pretty sure. And I would blush. So as a kid, I would blush so hard that my face would go like really bright red. And I just remember being so embarrassed. And that was the narrative for my life. I'm ugly. I'm going to amount to nothing. Really heavy words, to the point, this is where words are so important, to the point of I caught up with my best friend who knew me from when I was 3 until forever. And we were talking about my father the other day, and she said, I remember us going on a skiing trip, and he used to really belittle you and say horrible things. I can't remember those things, which is really scary. But that really summed up my life. Is I felt so unloved. There was money, but it was always conditional. And I always had to pick the subjects at school that my dad wanted, hang out the friends with my dad wanted. My dad would take me clothes shopping, and I have to wear certain things that he would say. It was all just him, to the point where people at school thought my mother was no longer. They're like, do you have a mum? We thought she was dead, because I had no connection with my mother, and there was no love there. And then as my relationship grew with my father, it wasn't until I lived in America. So I worked at Walt Disney World in Florida. So I worked there for a bit. And when I came back, I was 20, 21, and it felt like I had been shunted in the face by, your dad's actually a dick, and this is what he's been like. And I know he had multiple affairs with my mother, but when I came back, he actually left her for someone else and left my mother with no money and just completely blackmailed her. And she's just a shell of a woman. And it's just so interesting that I could have gone that way. And then because of him, for all of my life until 6 years ago, the men I used to attract were like him. And every relationship I would have with a man got worse, got more abusive, until the last one I thought he was going to kill me. And we can go into those details. But that is where, like, my story and who Barbara was I constantly was like, I don't look like anyone else. I don't feel like anyone else. You imagine as a kid, no love, no support, no direction, no one to be like, oh, hey, what do you think of this? Can I do this? Now it makes sense. I played a musical instruments. I played the saxophone. I did netball. I did like brownies and Girl Guides. I did any activity, athletics, young enterprise at school, anything that you can think of, I did, obviously to get away from my family. But my parents would never drop me off anywhere. I always had to, mum was like, no, you find your own way. I'm not driving in the dark. You do it. And I was like, far out, like, and they just taught me nothing. And I mean nothing. I didn't even know, when I went flatting, I didn't even know how to turn on a washing machine. I didn't know how to cook. Didn't know how to function. And they had just kept me in this bubble. But at the same time, both of them were threatened by me and really pulled me down and just treated me like shit. So there's abuse in different ways. But it was just I just remember that feeling, the pit in my stomach whenever Dad was angry at me, or he would say those hurtful things in front of people. I just wanted to curl up and die. It was horrific. And then when I did get some oh my God, then when I did have boyfriends, a couple of the guys that actually asked me out at the petrol station, I think 3 boyfriends. So good place to work if you wanted to pick up, like they would come and ask me out. And I remember all of them were frightened of my father. Everyone knew who he was. And yeah, it's just so interesting that they all knew who he was, and he would even talk to them and tell them what time I had to be home, and controlled them as well.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, and you were right, like so many similarities to to my childhood, the controlling, and it's ancestral trauma that just gets passed down, passed down, passed down, passed down, and no one seems to stop it. And then it ends at our line and we're like, oh, okay, let's do some heavy lifting here. Let's rewrite every single program that was ever pushed down the line and actually got this far down the line, without anyone being innovative and changing it. But I'm sorry you had to go through all that. And it's interesting because I was like, you deserve to be validated, which you validate yourself. But at the same time, we both know that we chose that. We completely and utterly chose every part of it to become the people that we are today. And it does take, like, I read a quote recently, and it said Like, I think it was something like the amount of violence I've had to go through to be this kind is incredible. And, it always gives me goosebumps because I'm like, you have no fucking clue. Like they say, kind people are not born kind, you're made because you see how hard it is to go through everything. And it wasn't just like dad had a bad temper when he drunk, but he was perfect most of the time. It's like, no, you have to wake up, and it's a beautiful journey. I love how you said that, you get to the point. I feel like we all get to this point where we realize our parents are not the best things in the world. We're like, this is not normal. Like you wake up and you're like, oh, your mom actually isn't cold, or your dad's like this. And it takes you a huge, huge, huge shift to get to that point. So what I'm curious with is like the timestamps on your journey as to big shifts you had in your life. Like, did you find that, from 20 to 30, there was a lot of darkness, and then at 30, you kind of just started to come out of it? Or was it just like a gradual moment? Or was there like, oh, because obviously you were called for self care and therapy. Like, you always knew somewhere in your psyche that that's what you were put on this planet to do. And it's like, where in your journey do you kind of have that shift from darkness to light? It's like we have these pivotal
Only
moments.
recently. Honestly, I had because I've got so much capacity to hold for people. And it was so interesting that so many people, and I laugh, they're so intimidated. And I'm like, physically or financially or whatever, I have nothing on you, but people would just be intimidated by my presence. And it was just such a bizarre thing. But the shifts happened, it's almost like every 10 years. So when I got married, when I was 30, I got married because I thought that's what you do when you've been with someone for such a long time. And my ex-husband was a bodybuilder. He was my trainer who I met. He was on steroids and stuff. And I think within the first, I can't remember now, maybe the first year, he had a very bad temper to the point of the first time he got my head and like smashed it against the wall, like actually physically got my head and then banged it against the wall. And I remember the first thing I did was just I ran down the street crying because I didn't know what to do. And I was like, oh my God, I'm that woman. Oh my God, I've got to put a stop to it. And I said he had to go to anger management classes, otherwise we're done. And he went to anger management classes and did all that, but that didn't stop him. The second time he grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and pulled me up and literally spun me around. And because I was so fiery and so mouthy, I would know how to push his. I was so mouthy and so fiery, and I just would go at him and go at him. I don't know what about, to the point where then I would see that change in his eyes. And I remember him getting me by like the top of the t-shirt, picking me up, swinging me around because he's a huge unit, and shoved me on the ground and stood over me. And I went, fuck. Or I just remember going, I've got to shut up. I've got to shut up. From that moment, the second or third time he touched me, in my head, I was like, I can't have children with you. Like subconsciously, deep down, I was just like, I think that's where I checked out. I didn't love him anymore. I stayed with him. It was absolutely miserable looking back. Fuck, I used to cry every New Year's. I was so lonely. Everyone thought that we were the great couple. Fuck, it was horrendous. And then it got me, this is for anyone listening, you live this life, you live this facade, got to stay married because you're married. And I'm like, I don't cheat. I never looked at any guys, but it took me, I was head of marketing for a paper company. I worked 7 days a week. I chucked all of myself into the work. At the same time, a year after I got married, I rebranded the whole company, took them through a rebrand. The company was turning, it's a family business, 80 or 85. So also the same people that did the Heineken Tennis Open in Auckland were the same people I hired. So I'm just trying to explain the scale of things. They were the same company that I hired to do the company birthday party. And at the same time, we were revealing our new brand. So it was a really massive, big night. And for me too, career-wise and just everything-wise. And I remember I got a dress made for the night because Barbara, being Barbara, didn't want to wear anything that everyone else wore. So I went and got a dress made for the night, got my hair and makeup done. And I remember walking into the room before it all started, and we had a new business development manager guy, had started at the company, I don't know, for a couple of months. I walked into the room and he whistled at me and was like, woo! And I remember going, oh, that was nice. I got some attention, didn't I? because I wasn't getting attention from my husband anymore, and I felt really low on myself. Then I remember hunching down in a corner, like sculling some champagne. Like I wasn't really a big drinker back then, but I remember I must have subconsciously thought, yeah, I'm gonna get fucked up tonight. So my career was like, it was a big thing for me. And I just pretty much got tiddly quite quickly. And then when it was the Barbara show, like anyone that went to this event, it was like, Barbara, you've done so well. And it was incredible. But at the same time, when the party all finished, I was like, where is this guy? I remember asking my staff, where is he? And they were like, oh, because my ex-husband had no friends, never smoked, never drunk, was a bodybuilder, would stay at home, sleep on the couch and train, and couldn't hold a job down. This other guy was about 15, 20 years older than me, had a beer gut, covered in tattoos, heavy smoker, heavy drinker, and had heaps of friends and was always out. Can you see what I was missing? So one of the big shifts in my life was that night when I hunted this guy down. About 4 o'clock in the morning, I put my hand on his hand at the bar and said, I really like you. And he said, I really like you too. And then that night I kissed him. Nothing else happened, but I got home and left my ex-husband and went and lived with this guy for a bit. And that was on and off for 2 years, it was, and the whole country knew, because New Zealand's the whole industry knew. He was very well known for being a womanizer and having threesomes and sleeping around and all that kind of stuff. Everyone knew my business.
The guy that you were with.
Yeah. So everyone knew my business. Then all my clients, because I've been at my job for like 12 years, everyone would be like, there'd be an old guy walking across the car park and one of the directors of a big print company would be like, Barbs, there's your boyfriend. It turned into a joke, but then my life really unraveled quickly from this point. So I was with him for maybe 18 months on and off. It was quite drug induced, would write myself off a lot. I
wanted to and I'm sorry to cut you off there. I just feel like this is so important and you're going to have a good answer because this is what you do for a living. But it's so interesting that you're talking about this, because I feel that so many women I've spoken to that have been at the end of marriages have had something so similar. Even I did, I had an affair and the same shit. The guy was not better than the husband, but they're giving you attention and you are dying for the attention because you're so starved of it. So a lot of my friends, same thing, like their relationship was just dying. Some hot guy at a work Christmas party, or it almost sounds too good to be true, but it's the same shit every time. So do you think, like, psychologically with our mind and who we are and how we operate as humans, is it that we just want one thing better? Like, it's like we've got to replace the whole package, but we're just going for an upgrade. Like, what's your personal experience around this? Like, why do we need because
for me, I was trapped so much that I didn't know I was that trapped. And for me to get so off my face, then see someone and it was something switched to me that night. It was like, I want him. Didn't care for my husband anymore. I would never have left. I think that night didn't happen because I was so entrenched. My parents were divorced. I wouldn't have made the move otherwise. So for me, that night had to happen for me to leave my marriage, regardless if I was going to stay with the guy or not. My guy wasn't hot, but I had to. That was me. That was my only way. I was so deeply unhappy, so much I didn't realize how lonely, how bad it was, that for me to get so off my face, for me in front of my work colleagues, and they were like my family. So that work company treated me so well, was so good to me. Beautiful people, they were my family. For me to bluntly do that in front of everyone saw me do it, to the point in the taxi on the way to this guy's hotel, even my work colleagues, regional managers from down the line, this guy and his wife were saying, Barbara, come and stay with us. When you're drunk, it seemed like forever, but geez, probably would have been a couple of hours in the back of a taxi trying to talk to drunk Barbara, come back with us, because they could see, come back, Barbara, don't go with Duncan. And I was just like, nah, I'm going. So no one could stop me. But from my personal point of view, I didn't realize how unhappy I was. You're unhappy, but I would have stayed with that guy for the rest of my life.
But what's interesting, looking at all these, and then with mine and all my friends that have gone through something so similar, and the guy is very similar to Duncan, like they're nothing amazing. It's not like you're leaving, a rat for a prince. But I feel it's almost like the universe interjecting and giving you the light. Like it's like it knows you're going to take this path, and when you're that far down, like I always say, the affair was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I was so trapped and I was so stuck, and it was in between two men, and both of them were shit. Both of them were, how low is my fucking self-esteem to be here? But because I was in between both, the light emerged in between the two of them, and I was able to walk through. And it can be the hardest thing in the world to get there, but because you go to the next person, I think that's like trust and faith, and it's like it's actually self-care in a really trippy way, because it's like you knew that you were better than that, and so you just went for the next best thing.
Oh
And even
no,
though it's not that great, like
it was
it's just your
worse.
mm,
Sorry, every single guy I've been with, and I'm just going to quickly give a snippet of that situation to share with someone how you can hate yourself so much and it reflects in the partner. So the next guy I went with, so my ex-husband couldn't hold a job down. I think a couple of weeks before I actually went with the other guy, my ex-husband cried to me at my dining room table and said, I can't do life anymore, because he couldn't hold a job down or anything. He said, I think I'm going to be a monk. And then just started to cry. And he was always saying to me, you're the most sexless person I've ever met. And that is absolutely not true. And so then when I met this other guy, he was just like, holy shit. And this other guy had the alcoholic shakes. He would come up to me and be like, have you got $20 for a packet? He couldn't even afford a packet of cigarettes. So I'm being very honest here, how little I thought of myself. And every partner from that, the two others after that, I had a couple in between, but there's four that have really changed the direction of my life. So you got my ex-husband, then you've got the guy that I worked with, to the point where that was unfortunate, because everyone in my working community, a couple of the old school managers, I actually went and had a meeting with all the shareholders, because I was really high up in this company, really well respected. I worked really hard. And then I actually sat in front of the shareholders and said, I'm going to squash all the rumors. I was really honest. I said, I've left Justin. They had no idea he would hit me. They had no idea how unhappy I was. So this was a massive shock to everyone. Perfect Barbara. What the hell? She's gone with Duncan. Oh my God, like whatever. And I could never really tell them what Justin did, because so I was a bad person, to the point of I never got a new company car renewal. My contract from that point, because of what I did in my personal life, it scarred me as a career. And everyone knew about it, the whole country, everyone in my industry knew about it. Then from that, and so this guy was an alcoholic, had the shakes. That was the first time that I tried heavy drugs, was when I was with this guy, to the point of there'd always be, oh my God. So when you check your partner's phone, I used to work with this guy. We went to a very swanky restaurant one night. He was sitting across the table from me. Everyone knew we were together. Everyone knew we were living together. He was always on his phone. That night when he was snoring next to me in bed, something in me said, check his phone. I checked his phone. Fucking hell. He had the same text message to about 12 different women. I actually knew most of these women because they worked in the industry. They were print reps and stuff. Hey, babe, are you up? Can I come over? And obviously no one had got back to him that night. And here I am lying in bed next to this dude who's a loser, looking at all these other women that he's texting. And I was like, oh my God. Anyway, long story short, it was just insane. And then from him, a lot happened. But then when that all ended, maybe a year or so later, I met the guy that I moved to Australia for. And I had met him through this guy. And we always had a connection. And he actually messaged me on Facebook and was just like saying stuff. We started talking, and then he came to New Zealand and he was doing FIFO work at the time. And yeah, it was all like, oh my God, this is the guy. This is my guy. I was so adamant that this guy was my guy. So in love, So adamant. The writing, again, when you're being brought up with a narcissist father, or I will go as far as to say that later on in my life, the men that I was attracted to were and have been psychopaths. So I didn't know any different. And this particular guy that I moved to Australia for from New Zealand, actually his trademark. So remember I said each one got worse and worse and worse. So this one, he would go on 4 or 5 day benders and I wouldn't see him. He'd start drinking, then he'd do coke, then he'd gamble, and then I just wouldn't see him. And his family would enable him. I was the bad person. So I moved to Australia, left my job, sold all my things, brought my 2 dogs over. And then I think within the next day, would you believe it? Forgot about this. The next day I said, oh, babe, can I use your phone? Because I hadn't had a phone. And I know everyone back in New Zealand wanted to make sure that my dogs arrived, you know, they were okay and I was okay. Picked up his phone, saw his name of his ex-girlfriend who was from New Zealand, and they had been texting back and forth like, oh, Barbara's coming, that's a shame, like how are we going to talk now, I love you so much, I can't wait to be with you, like clearly. And I was like, what the fuck? And so I just went out and had a go at him, and obviously it was all my fault and it was all me. And then from that moment, I think within like 2 months, he accused me of cheating and all this kind of stuff, which clearly he was doing. I just stayed with him for a year because I just had nothing here and I had to get established. And so then he led me on to the next guy, which was the most dangerous man. And that's why I have become a therapist, is because of the combination of all of these relationships. So here I was living in a different country and I was just like, for fuck's sake, I really keep repeating, like I had nothing left. I keep repeating the same pattern. I know it's related to my father. I had done enough work on myself to know the patterns, but I was like, I actually cannot do this anymore. And so when I moved into my new place, left my partner that I moved here for, he kept turning up at my doorstep. And he kept he would always be coked out of his head, or he'd be like knocking on my door, babe, I've got no money for a taxi, babe, can you pay for my taxi? So then he'd sleep on the couch, you know? So obviously my type, these guys just never have any money. Babe, can you pay for my taxi? And I was like, fucking hell. And so, and then got to the point where I'd walk the dogs and then I'd get an email from him. Oh, I saw you walking the dog. And I'd be like, it's kind of stalking a little bit. And then, so I was like, I'm going to find a counsellor. I'm going to sort myself out, you know? I'm going to, there's something needs to be done. I did my own research. This is the kicker. This is where I know the universe was like, you have to have one more, Barbara. I did my own research, found this counsellor. He had an old-fashioned name like me. I still remember meeting him. And as soon as I looked at him, he blushed, like he went bright red, and he dropped his clipboard. And I giggled to myself and I went, oh, I still have it. Cute. Still cute, you know? And I went into these sessions with this guy. And he's the most dangerous man I have ever met. So long story short was there was this very strong magnetic connection between us, the most strongest I've ever had. But he was very dangerous in a way that, so in the end, I ended up having a relationship with him. I ended up working for him. And I saw how he worked, that he had this spiritual side to him that I'd never seen before. And this is what opened me to the spiritual side of things as well, because spiritual things were happening to me. But from his point of view, he would get new clients that would come and see him. And they would always, when they'd come and pay me at the desk, and I'd do their invoicing and stuff, they'd be like, how does this guy operate? How does he know about me? And I'd be like, what do you mean? And they'd be like, well, I was raped at the age of 4, or this happened to me with my uncle, or I went on this trip and I fell off this cliff. Like, he would tell people stuff that they would never have told anyone. So in the first session, he would somehow read them and repeat back to them, and people would actually come to me and be like, he told me stuff that I've never told anyone. So I know he had this, he wasn't just a normal human being. There was something extra to this man. And I remember having a session with him, and there was like a white light in the corner, like literally. And I'm so green to spirituality at this point. And I was like, wow. I was like rubbing my eyes going, wow, I'm really messed up here. And when I saw this guy, he gave me a book about this counselor, gave me a book about psychopaths. And that was really good because that book was another turning point. I read this book 3 or 4 times, and I actually give it to my clients now. It is the most fascinating book that explains the cycle, explains the red, I didn't know anything, explains the red flags. They're all textbook. All of these guys would behave exactly the same way. And he gave me this book, and I was like, oh, like I actually really grateful for him for that. I was like, wow, thank you, for fuck's sake. Now I've got answers. And at the same time, my ex-partner kept turning up at my doorstep. Now, this counselor didn't like this. So he was like, I'm going to help you get an AVO on this guy. I had never dealt with the police in my life. Anyway, so this counselor guy helped me get an AVO on my ex-partner, didn't he? So he could move
Wow.
closer to me. So I had to go through all of
Wow.
that.
It's a bit of an overstep, isn't it?
Had to go through all of that. And so much overstepped to the point of when I had made the statement to the police, he had a hot dinner and a hot shower ready for me to help me. Yeah.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's and just to pause there, the like red flag for anyone listening, you said that, you know, this relationship had the most amount of chemistry possible. And, you know, that is like the biggest red flag there is in relationships when it's starting, like that intense level of chemistry that's almost like zoom, like it just feels
Yeah.
really intense, like a drug,
But
because it's
also,
like this addictive.
he was different to everyone. It's interesting me saying this. He was different. I want people to hear my words. He was different to anyone I had ever been with before. As in, he was the same age as me. Really nerdy and geeky looking, right? He'd wear his watch halfway up his arm, like real nerdy. Had a lot of money, had his own business, very successful, very smart, could have a few drinks and not go over the top. You know what I mean? Like he was at the beginning, I was like, oh, that's what swung me. I got
So
offered a job.
this is so interesting because it's like we do the inner work, we change the pattern, but it's so deep rooted that it's like, oh no, 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 here's more. Like I just want to, like, it's like, no, no, you haven't completely pussed the pus out from the past. It's like, yes, have the different guy, but the same shit still there that you haven't healed with. Like it's trippy. It's like seeing the same problem from a different angle. So what were the signs where you were like, holy shit, this guy is a psychopath? Like what were kind of the
Yeah.
moments, so anyone that's listening that might find themselves in a confronting toxic relationship and go, oh my God, that's
About
yeah,
three,
like
yeah, about four moments I can tell you that all led to me walking away within 6 months of me seeing him as a therapist, me being his girlfriend, me working for him, and then me walking away and being scared that he was going to kill me. So, and that was all in 6 months. So it was really condensed.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, really condensed. Okay. So the first one was that I knew it was a red flag. We were together and we went down to Woolworths. This is the first sign that I saw that he was not okay. He wanted to get some kind of salmon from the deli and they were sold out, and he literally threw like a tantrum, and we went into his car, and I remember him speeding up the ramp from the supermarket, doing a skid, and then like doing smoke out of his tires all down the road and driving home like really erratic. I was just looking at him going, what the fuck? They had no salmon. Like that was the first thing that I went, is this guy all there? I was like, this is, and my heart, you know, it's so interesting because my heart and my tummy went into that funny place that when my dad would always tell me off, like now, you know, and I'll tell you why I recognize that. So that was the first thing. He would always make me cry all the time. Another red flag, another thing I noticed that he was a psychopath was the spiritual side. So we came home one night from being out somewhere. I met his family all really quickly as well. We were going somewhere or coming back, can't remember now, but he put his hand on my lower back, and through our relationship, like he raped me as well. So that was a whole nother section where I said no, and he just like literally physically raped me, which was absolutely awful, horrible. I don't wish that on anyone. But I knew when he pinned me down, like I'd been with 130, 140 kilo bodybuilder who's strong. I'm strong. This guy was a bit smaller than me, short. And when he would grab my wrists or anything, in a sexual way, non-sexual way, I would get scared because it was a strength I'd never felt before. And that's also what I knew. And then when we came home or wherever we were going, he put his hand on the lower back. I got shivers up and down my spine and all through my body, and a voice came in my head. And this is the first kind of spiritual counter. Danger, danger, get away, get away. And then from that moment, something in my brain clicked. You need to be smart here, Barbara. And then from that moment, he would say things when we were working together in the office, like when people would cancel on him, he'd get shitty and be like, no one fucks with me. And he'd change contracts, he'd forge documents to get back at clients. He said once, oh, I'll chuck a brick through this fucking guy's window. Like his anger would go from 0 to 1,000 within a heartbeat. And he talked about killing people and stuff. And then another red flag was we were in his apartment building. And one morning he was being ultra nice to me. And we were going out for brunch. And I got into the lift, and I'll never forget it. There was a smell. And I was like, and I'm very I can't handle smells. And I was like, oh, like, this is bad. This was like trash and shit and fish and I don't know, this most smelliest smells. And I was literally like throwing up in my mouth. And we got into the car. But as we got into the underground car park, I looked out. There was fire brigade, police, like everywhere.
Oh my God, dead bodies.
It was, yeah. And so most people would be like driving out going, oh my goodness, like, I wonder what's happening. He was like, oh, I need to find the head. Like he went into the storm, drove to where all the police were, opened the car door, had his car running, and his spiel was kind of like, I'm a therapist, and he was very good at it, and that's why I could never go to the authorities when I thought he was going to kill me, because he could just flip people. He's like, I'm a therapist, is everything going on? Tell me what's happening. On reflection, I can tell you now that he was part of that, but he killed that person, and he was part of that, because he went into that storm to ask all the questions, to fight. Like, I just know. I just know. And then there was, because he wasn't my first rodeo, when I would work into the clinic with him, there were some clients that would come in and he would flirt with them kind of, but take the piss out of me, like, oh, Barbara's accent, oh, it's terrible, isn't it? And because what started to happen, the shift in his business was he was back to back. He was so busy. And so that gave me the perception of, oh, I wonder if I could be a therapist. And the fact that everyone that would come and pay would talk to me, and I'd give them the time of day, and they'd be like, can we come and see you? So over time, the beginning of this guy's sessions but the clients would talk about me, how great I was. Does Barbara do counseling? And he's like, this isn't the Barbara show. And he'd get so fucked off because it got to the point where the majority of his clients were really wanting to come and see me. Can you do therapy? I would love to talk to you. I'm like, oh, I'm not a therapist, And that kind of got me thinking, well, I ran his 2 businesses, and I actually really enjoyed it. Fucking loved those 2 businesses. It was a hypnosis quit smoking clinic, and it was a counseling clinic, and I was really good at it. I was so good at talking to people. He was so back to back. Anyway, so I was really good at that, and I was like, I really like this. Then the last red flag, like I said, was a couple of women, I know who they are, would come into the clinic, and he would take the piss out of my accent. Then me going to his house every night and staying over stopped. It'd be hot and cold. And then I was like, there's someone else here. There's someone else here. Like, I'd go over and I'd see extra wine bottles, a lipstick on the glass. Like, I'd see all the signs where old Barbara would just ignore it. And I was just like, yeah. And then he bought a business of one of his clients, again, crossing all of these boundaries, like crossing all of these. He shouldn't be doing that, buying the business of his client. And he would always dog about her. He'd always be like, how ugly she was and how overweight she was. She was quite a big lady, and just saying all these things about her. And I was like, it's just like, and we're watching TV here, mate. I don't want to, we're holding hands. Like, you would say it and it'd just be really, I don't want to know. Always talking about this one particular lady. So then I kind of sat back and was like, I had the same feeling again that I had with my dad in my stomach and my throat. And I was like, he's sleeping with these 2 clients. But before I would be like, oh, no. And I just sat there and thought, oh my gosh. Okay.
What a like a good on you. What a huge breakthrough. Like that is literally the definition of smart. Like um it's like, well, no, because it's like when we think smart is like whether you get an A, B, C, or D on a test. Smart is someone stands there with a shovel and tries to punch you with, like, hit you with it, and they keep hitting you with it, and then you change getting hit with it and you duck. Like that's smart. It's the same event keeps playing out, but you change who you're being. And the same event, played out for 40 years. You got better at manifesting different scenarios of that same event, which we all do, because that's like, it's discernment, always use discernment. But one of my friends said that, who's a shaman, said that a lot of people say we have 4 core wounds or 3. It can depend soul to soul. But the things that we come here to learn and work on, like you could have, worked on this for many, many, many past lives. And in this lifetime, it's like, fuck it, I'm going to heal it. It's like, boom, let's go to the sharks and just fucking get this lesson tenfold fast, because this lesson you could have been like, imagine past life could have been with the one guy for your whole entire life and died with him punching you in the face. But in this lifetime, you're like, no, next. It's all growth. It's all growth, even though our mind will logically go, oh, he was worse than the last one. Like, no, like it was all growth, and it served you so greatly, because thank God, I think something happens when you see somebody that is a complete and utter psychopath, no morals, no heart chakra activated, that is doing that work and serving so many people, and you get to have front row seats to that. There's something in you that goes, fuck me, if someone that fucked up can do that, I can do that 10 fucking times better, and I can go global and I can change the world. Like, fuck, that is like the best lesson you could ever get. And it's a huge breakthrough. Like it's massive, same event, different new outcome. And huge, like, kudos goes off to you. They say that the average woman has to get beaten like 7 or 8 times before she even thinks about leaving.
Yeah.
And it's like, fuck, like and it's funny because from a quantum or universal perspective, you breaking that cycle has just helped, hundreds of thousands of women, whether they are aware of it or not, break that cycle, because it's just an energy, and we all have to get better at understanding this. And it's huge, like it's massive. Like you should be so proud of yourself to have broken that cycle in, like it's easy to go, oh wow, 40 is so young these days. Like 40 is literally the new 20. Like
Oh, 43, but
it
yeah,
really is. Sorry.
I'm 43, but that's close enough.
Oh, I just mean 4 decades in,
Oh, yeah.
4 decades in. Like it's not so much about the time, it's that you broke the cycle. It's that you truly did so much fucking inner work to break the cycle. And it is hard work. It's not easy. It's not for everyone. Most people would have just sat there in the first relationship. Like I see so many breakthroughs along the journey, the move from New Zealand to Australia. It's a breakthrough. It's a move. It's a shift in the environment. It's constantly taking a stand and going, I don't want this life. I'm ready for the next one. I'm ready for the next one. And I think to anyone listening, feeling like, is there ever going to fucking be a light at the end of the tunnel? Like, am I ever going to fucking get there? Like, I fucking get it. Like, yes, for me, it was 3 decades, but it felt like fucking hell for 3 decades. It felt like the lights were out and nothing was working. And I never knew if I was going to get through it. And, and you would have gone through something similar where you're just fucking crying and you're sitting there and you're like, I've cried enough for the whole fucking Pacific Ocean. Like, I don't think I can cry anymore. And then because you've just, changed so much, you just finally surrender to a reality that the light can come in, and you've done that. And wow, like
Yeah.
it's incredible what you've been through and what you've accomplished because of what you've been through. And I know you wouldn't have had it any other way. Like, deep down that you are the woman you are because you had to go through all that. And if you were born perfect and everything went perfect, it would be so fucking boring and you wouldn't be where you are right now. You'd just be a TikTok influencer that's like, I like this lipstick. Ha!
Yeah, that's not me. But it's one thing I do, if anyone's listening to this, especially the females, I know it goes to the guys too, is so I was brought up in a family that looks for everything and you had to look a certain way. There's no way I would have shown up like this ever before. they were just everything, and you had to be perfect. I wasn't even allowed to buy those jelly shoes because my father was like, they're going to ruin the growth of your feet. Like everything was so aesthetics in my family, to the point where when I used to do bodybuilding in my mid-30s, and then when I met the guy that I moved here for, I was at my leanest, I was at my fittest. Even more people were staring at me, even more people were pointing, going, oh my God, she's a bodybuilder. Like I definitely stuck out. So my belief was, if you look a certain way, or you're pretty, or you're skinny enough, or whatever, your life will be perfect. And it's so interesting that I could reflect back in that moment. I had no idea I looked like that. I had there was a massive disconnect. I couldn't see how I looked. I didn't understand why everyone was commenting, and yeah, guys were asking me out, and I was just like, ooh, like I'm with someone long distance. I was so devoted to him, which was so messed up. But I couldn't see that, and I thought that that would make me happier and everything would be good. And that's just a perfect example that I was in that space and I still attracted that certain someone. And then he used it against me. He knew that was one of my core wounds. And so when I moved to Australia, I even got leaner and got into a lot of sport over here. And then he started to nitpick at me. I came home with some supplements one day and he was like, oh, spending all the money on yourself, I see. And I was like, oh, and he goes, can you stop doing that? You're so vain. He's like, you're so up yourself. He goes, you just need to stop doing that. And I was like, what the heck? And then it got to the point where he started to talk to other women online. And then I found out that the neighbor that I didn't like, that I had opened up to, had slept with him as well before I moved over. And she was married. So it was all this kind of entanglement, and it just really hurt my self-esteem. And then having to deal with his family, no one was on my side. I was the bad person. I just started to eat my feelings. And then it got to the point where I still wasn't the side, like I still hadn't put the weight on that I have now, but I was at a point where I was, gained a few kilos, and we were standing in the kitchen one day and he like touched my stomach and he was like, oh, wow. He goes, I really took you for granted when you were lean and looked really good. Look at you now. He's like, you were so pretty and you looked so good back then. It's a bit of a shame, isn't it? And I wasn't even like, hadn't put on much.
Oh my
And
God.
it's
Wow.
so interesting because he never came to my competitions. I did two. And the second one he was meant to come out for, he flew out like a week and a half, 2 weeks later. Had just come off a competition, so I was really hard and lean and muscular, and he hadn't seen me all that time. So my body had definitely gone through a transformation. And I remember I was on the phone and I felt someone kick my bum. I mean, he's 50 this year, so I mean he's not young. I was on the phone doing a work call and I was waiting at the gate at the airport to pick him up, and then I felt someone kick my bum, and I turned around, it was him. He's like, hey babe. I was like, hey, gave me a kiss, and we just walked to the car. And the whole time I was thinking, I mean, I wasn't expecting, oh, you look beautiful, but something. I hadn't seen him for ages. I had just finished a sport that your body changes for. I was expecting him to go, oh, babe, you look nice. I remember I made an effort as well, or wow, you look good, or nothing. And I remember putting the car into reverse, and I thought, I actually can't believe I'm going to ask this. And I remember putting it into reverse. I said to him, do I look any different? Because it got to the point where I was just like, this is messed up. And he's like, yeah, not really. And then we went to a bar and we had a bottle of champagne together, and we didn't finish that bottle of champagne because he got the shits because everyone was staring at me and he didn't like it. He's like, why is everyone fucking staring at you? Go, not even that special. We have to go now. And I was like, oh, okay. And in this moment, I actually didn't feel people staring at me. So it was so interesting. But that's what I want to say to people, anyone listening to this, that we all go through moments where our bodies change and fluctuate with weight. And if you always think, oh, I'll get a partner only when I look a certain way or whatever, I'm here to reverse that and say, actually, I was at the top of my game. I didn't even realize I was, and I still attracted shit because that's how I thought of myself and my inner being. And only now I can reflect back, but it just goes to show that how I thought of myself on the inside was what I attracted.
Wow. Wow, 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 wow. I wish we had more time because this has just been absolutely crazy. Which we knew we'll have to have you back on the show again soon because this is it's so beautiful. And, it's, I feel like, in this world, we're always talking about it's the motivation, it's the inspiration, but we get there because we've been through so much shit. We've turned shit into champagne, and it's not an easy journey. And it's a huge testament to you and the woman that you become, like, as you said to me, like, you with your star compilation, like, you were meant to be dead, you weren't meant to make it. And I think anyone that wasn't you would have or been killed or murdered or just drunk themselves to the ground.
Yeah.
And it's a huge testament
Sometimes
to
I
who you are,
wish I
because
could do
you
that. Sometimes I think,
you
oh man, Jesus, this is too hard.
I even had moments like that. I had one the other day, and like nothing was wrong, but I was just like, I could die right now. Like, this would be peaceful. Like, it just, but in a beautiful way. Like, I'm just like,
Normalize
life is
that.
a game. Life is just a game. Like, it just feels like we're in a video game. And I try not to take it too seriously, because I'm like, why? Like, life's just showing me a simulation of an event. The only thing I need to do is stay calm and observe the event in a place of calm. That's all we have to do. Like, because there's always a story that is causing the event. If we just rewrite that story or just remain calm, it's everything's always happening for me. I don't understand why the universe is doing this right now, but it's all happening for me. None of it's happening to me. And when we can just be in that energy, it's amazing. So before I let you go, I want to know, like, if you had one piece of advice, like, for anybody in the entire world that just feels like, and it doesn't even need to be about being in toxic relationships, but just feels like they're never going to get their lucky break, like their dark soul of the night, and what do they call it? The dark soul of the night is just like going forever, and they feel like they're never going to break through. Like, what is the one piece of advice you would give them?
That's a really good question. I think the biggest advice that I always, like, don't shit on yourself. Like, actually, if you feel something, whether it's someone you're working with, a neighbor, and you just get a feeling, I don't like them, there's a reason why. And we just are so quick to have a quick 2-second thought and then dismiss it. This doesn't feel right, or whatever. Like, we're too quick to not sit with ourselves and trust our inner voice, because our inner voice is there for a reason. So a lot of us are always worried about what other people think and people pleasing, and then we overthink those factors. So it is hard to keep going, and you literally, I think you just got to look at today. What can I do today? Because the human condition as a therapist is, I know that we all want certainty. We all a fear. We lack self-worth, and we're fearful of everything. We're fearful of not being enough, and not being enough that no one will love us. But if all of that kind of tied into a neat bow is your intuition and trusting yourself, and you can never go wrong.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much. So for anybody here that wants more of Barbara, where can they find you? Where's the best places for them to connect with you?
Yeah, so they come over to Instagram. That's where I normally hang out, is self_care_studio. And they can send me a DM, even if there's anything that resonated with them. Just say hi, and I'm happy to chat to them. And also on my website, selfcarebybarbarathompson.com.au, or on my podcast, which is Studio Chat Podcast, which can be found on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. We have been so blessed with your presence, and cannot wait to have you back again very soon.
And thank you so much for asking me. It's such an honor and a pleasure to share my story with you.
Thank you so much.